This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, and faith-focused feature stories with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
Budget drama at the New York Capitol. Good afternoon. Welcome to the broadcast.
Very proud to announce that we've reached a general agreement for the state budget.
There's no budget deal. There's no deal.
Just hours after Governor Hochul announced a $268 billion budget deal, Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie proclaimed, "Not so fast." He says key numbers still need to be nailed down and blasted the governor for using the budget for policy purposes.
I'm never doing this again. Budgets are supposed to be about money, not policy.
In her budget speech yesterday, Hochul highlighted the creation of buffer zones around places of worship and announced new restrictions on ICE agents in the Empire State. The April jobs report went public today, and it was a good one. Employers adding 115,000 jobs to their payrolls last month. That is better than what economists were expecting. The overall unemployment rate held steady at 4.3%. The luxury cruise ship hit with the hantavirus outbreak docks on Sunday in the Canary Islands. Off the coast of Spain, there are still over 100 passengers aboard, including 17 Americans. NBC's Danielle Hamajin.
Spanish officials want to make sure there is no direct contact with the public. The ship will not be docked. It'll be anchored nearby, and passengers will be brought here to the port, 5 passengers at a time, to a cordoned-off area, directly to the nearby airport, to another cordoned-off area where they will board their repatriation flights back home.
The CDC's keeping tabs on U.S. citizens from 5 states who got off that vessel before the virus was detected. Reporter Tom Hansen continues our coverage.
Those Americans are not reporting any symptoms so far. Nonetheless, the CDC taking this very seriously, working with the WHO and State Department to monitor those passengers who have returned home.
About 30 people from a dozen countries are still being sought. 3 people died of the virus, a couple from the Netherlands and a German woman. 5 others were sickened. The WHO stresses this hantavirus outbreak is not the start of another pandemic. Menacing moves in the Middle East. 3 U.S. naval destroyers came under attack Thursday by Iran in the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump affectionately referring to the military action as love taps.
They trifled with us today. We blew them away.
The commander-in-chief speaking to reporters about the prospects for peace and the consequences for Iran if there's not a deal to end the fighting soon.
If there's no ceasefire, you're not going to have to know. You're just going to have to look at one big glow coming out of Iran. And they better sign their agreement fast.
Tehran's claiming ownership of the Strait of Hormuz, even as the U.S. naval blockade continues. No ships are allowed in or out without our say-so. The NAACP has filed an appeal to block Tennessee from removing the only majority black congressional district in the volunteer state. Governor Bill Lee signed that newly drawn congressional map yesterday after a raucous vote at the State House in Nashville.
Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. Let every member cast their vote.
That vote comes after the U.S. Supreme Court last week struck down race-based gerrymandering in Louisiana. Terry Sewell is with the Congressional Black Caucus.
It will not only suppress minority votes in the halls of Congress, but it will erode minority representation in state houses, city councils, and even school boards across this nation.
Republicans hope to pick up a couple dozen seats in the Deep South this fall due to redistricting. Democrats are countering with mid-decade gerrymandering of their own in states like New York and California. A new study shows politics is literally destroying American friendships, and the data shows one side of the aisle is far more likely to walk away from a relationship because of political disagreement. By a 66 to 27% margin, Democrats are more likely than Republicans to initiate a political breakup. Clinical psychologist Chloe Carmichael says Americans need to learn how to build bridges, not burn them.
Violence increases when dialogue ceases. So liberals might think that they're being virtuous by declining to talk to people that differ from them. But when we're shutting down dialogue, we're actually making ourselves more prone to suppression, repression, passive aggression, and even violence.
Overall, nearly 4 in 10 Americans have lost a relationship with a friend, a family member, romantic partner, or a coworker because of political differences. One of the world's most beloved wildlife defenders is celebrating his 100th birthday today.
A polar bear stirs. She has been in her den the whole winter. Her emergence marks the beginning of spring.
For over 70 years, David Attenborough has brought his documentaries on the wonders of the world into millions of homes all over the globe.
They circle the herd, trying to unsettle it and split it up. But the bison are armed and dangerous.
David Attenborough, 100 years old today. Still to come on the Noon Report for a Friday. Should Fetterman switch parties? More reaction to New York's budget drama, and farmers depend on migrant labor.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams, tracking a couple of showers and some more cool air for the afternoon. Weekend forecast details, we'll detail those in the forecast. That's up in 10.
All right, Kevin, we'll see you then. Let's check the stories making news across New York and Pennsylvania. NASCAR is celebrating 40 years of racing this weekend at Watkins Glen International, one of only 3 road courses on the professional circuit. The first race was run there in 1957, but it did not become a recurring event at WGI until 1986. This weekend marks the first time racing will happen in the month of May. Usually takes place in August or September, and next year, in fact, NASCAR's announced the racing will return to its usual schedule. That should please a lot of fans there at the racetrack this weekend. New York leaders are pouncing on the premature budget announcement made yesterday from Governor Hochul. She announced a $268 billion spending plan. Turns out there's more dealing that needs to be done. Assembly Minority Leader Ed Raw.
This is the latest budget in my time in the legislature, because I started in 2011, and she's out here announcing a deal that doesn't actually exist.
Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie says the governor was wrong to announce a deal. He says there's still a lot of fiscal items needing sorted out.
There's so many open issues on money where, on all parts of the budget, the governor's team, the Senate's team, the Assembly's team sign off. We signed off on nothing major. And this is what I'm telling y'all is wrong with this process. And I'm saying this to y'all very clearly. I am never doing this again.
Hastie's upset the governor used the budget process to push policy items like enacting new ICE restrictions. GOP gubernatorial candidate Bruce Blakeman says of the budget drama,
reminds me of that TV show, Deal, No Deal. This is the most highest tax state in America, and now she's adding on more taxes.
Meantime, Borders Czar Tom Homan's now threatening to flood the streets of New York with ICE agents if the state enacts controversial sanctuary policies that would limit immigration enforcement and offer greater protections to illegal immigrants. New York dairy farmers are becoming increasingly reliant on migrant labor to run their day-to-day operations. Joel Reelman with Venture Farms in Onondaga County milks over 1,000 cows a day.
As a dairy farmer, if I could milk all the cows myself, I would, because I really enjoy milking cows.
He tells Spectrum News cows never take a vacation, and that makes reliable migrant labor not just a luxury, but a necessity.
Our cows, they got to be milked 3 times a day, every day, 7 days a week.
Reelman employs over a dozen migrant farm hands on his dairy operation there in central New York. Statistics show nationwide about 70% of all farm workers are migrants. Richard Stepp is an agriculture specialist at Cornell University.
Simply a matter that the rural population is not as large as it used to be. There aren't as many people that are staying to work on those farms as there was at one time.
Many milk farmers in New York are calling for reforms to a state migrant labor program so workers in the country on seasonal visas can remain on those dairy operations all year round. Pennsylvania Democratic Senator John Fetterman is reacting to rumors that he's considering switching parties and becoming a Republican. Fetterman says he'd be a terrible Republican and points out that he still votes a majority of the time with Democrats.
In a Washington Post editorial, Fetterman also writes that he supports a secure border and a strong Israel, adding, "These once common views have become increasingly toxic in the Democratic Party, a result of catering to the fringe and agitated parts of our base."
That's Dennis Owens with ABC 27, who recently interviewed Ryan Cooper with the far-left news magazine American Prospect about the prospects of Fetterman winning re-election as a Democrat.
Can John Fetterman win a Democratic primary?
Absolutely not. He is underwater by 40 points.
Cooper calls Fetterman the political equivalent of a modern-day Benedict Arnold.
He was, supposed to be like a type of person in the mold of AOC, Zoran Mamdani.
Prominent Democrats are already lining up to challenge Fetterman in 2 years. Philly Congressman Brendan Boyle is among them.
Almost every day, our Democratic senator from this state goes on TV, most often on Fox News, never criticizes President Trump and is always criticizing Democrats. And I don't know why that is.
Fetterman says he prioritizes principle over partisanship, adding that the Democratic Party cannot simply be the opposite of whatever Donald Trump says. The junior senator is up for a re-election in 2028 and is not publicly committed to running for a second term. Blue states have bled $2 trillion in wealth to red states in the last decade, and New York State is leading the pack. Here's Family Life's Sarah Harnish.
It's being called the biggest wealth transfer in history. Nearly $2 trillion has shifted from blue to red states. That's larger than the GDP of some countries. It's all according to new economic data from the Committee to Unleash Prosperity, a conservative economic group. New York had the biggest fall in cumulative income of all 50 states, losing $660 billion between 2012 and 2023. Sarah Harnish, Family Life News.
Thank you, Sarah. Artificial intelligence is taking a bigger bite out of the U.S. labor market. Listen to this from correspondent Michael Toscano.
In April, AI is cited as the top cause of layoffs, responsible for 26% of them. Company closures came in second, then cost-cutting. AI is affecting white-collar jobs, unlike past automation cycles where blue-collar workers were more vulnerable. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics says layoffs in professional and business services, sectors vulnerable to AI, rose by 150,000 in March from a year earlier. Michael Toscano, Washington.
Erie County, New York leaders are debating the county's gas tax. Family Life's Dee Haley.
Republican legislators are proposing changing how Erie County's sales tax on gas is calculated so it would only apply to the first $2 of every gallon cost and would be kept like it was in 2022. Right now, the county sales tax on gas is 4.75%, so the amount you pay changes based on the price of gas. Republicans say the change would save drivers money. Erie County Budget Director Mark Cornell reports this would potentially take millions of dollars away from local municipalities and school districts. The proposal was tabled yesterday, meaning it could come up for discussion again in the future. Dee Haley, Family Life News.
Plans are in the works to celebrate America's 250th birthday at Canal Side in Buffalo. It's hosting two events over the 4th of July weekend. One will feature the world's largest rubber duck. How about that? This 6-story duck and her 10-foot-tall baby duck will arrive at Canal Side July 3rd and stay through the 5th. The second event happens Friday, July 3rd at the Outer Harbor with a Buffalo Philharmonic Orchestra performance, followed by, of course, fireworks. What's the fourth without fireworks? Flags from the original 13 colonies have been erected at Gettysburg in Pennsylvania's Part of America 250 celebrations. Charles Gable is the Gettysburg Borough Manager.
You can see the signs under each flag is the year and the date that they were actually admitted into the Union. And Delaware was first, Pennsylvania was second, Rhode Island was the last.
New York was the 11th state admitted to the Union. Those flags will remain on display at historic Gettysburg through the fall. Sports is next. It's the 2-minute drill right here on Family Life.
Good
afternoon. I'm Randy Snavely. Bob, the defending champion Thunder, held serve on their home court advantage, taking down the Lakers 125-107, and they really won the game with their best player on the bench. Oklahoma City trailed LA by 5 when Shai Gilgeous-Alexander picked up his 4th foul right at the start of the second half. He sat for the rest of the third quarter, and by the time he returned, the Thunder were up 13. Chet Holmgren and Alexander tied for a team-high 22 points. Oklahoma City up 2-0. The Pistons also held home court advantage, knocking off Cleveland 107-97 in Game 2. Cade Cunningham had 25 points. Tobias Harris chipped in with 21. On the ice, the Philadelphia Flyers could not solve Carolina's attack. They are now in a 3-0 hole after losing to the Canes 4-1. On to baseball, the Yankees crushed Texas 9-2. Trent Grisham 3 for 5 and had a bases-clearing double to lead New York. The Mets gave up 4 runs in the 8th inning on a granny by Jake McCarthy, and that gave the Rockies a 6-2 victory. It was too much JT Ginn as he struck out 8 over 8 innings of 1-run ball, and the Phillies got blasted by the Athletics 12-1. The Pirates 4-2 winners over Arizona. Brandon Lau and Joey Bart both went deep in the victory. Other winners were Cleveland, Tampa Bay, the Cubs. Cubs have now won 9 straight. Cards, Nats, and Marlins. And finally this, the track full of twists and turns will be busy on Sunday. Go Bowling at the Glen takes place in Watkins Glen as NASCAR comes to town. That is a look at sports.
All righty, Randy, thank you very much. And still to come on the Noon Report, the Capital Connection crew ready to chime in on all that's happening in Albany and Harrisburg. Kev says it's a mixed bag weather-wise for your Mother's Day weekend. And at the end of the broadcast today, some bird blues in Lidditz, PA.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stone Street. This month marks the 130th anniversary of one of the most infamous cases in the history of the United States Supreme Court. Plessy v. Ferguson challenged a notorious Jim Crow law, one of many that at the time had replaced slavery with segregation in the South. Homer Plessy was a black man arrested for buying a ticket for a so-called white train car. He was arraigned before Judge John Ferguson for defying a Louisiana law that required railroads to provide what were called equal but separate cars for people of different races. Plessy argued that the Louisiana law imposed a badge of servitude on him and denied him equal protection under the laws and the exercise of his privileges and immunities as a U.S. citizen. The state of Louisiana argued that it was reasonable exercise of the state's police powers. The case worked its way to the U.S. Supreme Court, where, in a 7-1 decision, the court upheld Louisiana's law as constitutional. The court allowed the state to rely on, and I quote, the established usages, customs, and traditions of the people. The decision dealt a crucial blow to efforts for racial equality, validating the separate but equal doctrine as constitutional for several more decades. The lone dissent in the decision came from Justice John Marshall Harlan. Though he was an early supporter of slavery and an opponent of Abraham Lincoln, Harlan came to see the end of the Civil War and the subsequent amendments to the Constitution as part of God's divine plan to free the nation from the evil of slavery. He referred to the Declaration as, quote, our political Bible, with its proclamation of equality as proof of America's moral legitimacy. In Plessy, he provided what's perhaps the most famous dissenting opinion in Supreme Court history, saying, quote, our Constitution is colorblind and neither knows nor tolerates classes among citizens, end quote. As we consider here the legacy of Plessy for today, it's fitting to consider one of the greatest contemporary speeches given by a sitting Supreme Court justice just recently. Justice Clarence Thomas spoke at the University of Texas to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. In that speech, he said equality is from God, and that the Declaration is in fact, along with the Gospels, one of the greatest anti-slavery documents in the history of Western civilization. He then spoke of Plessy v. Ferguson, calling racial segregation, and I quote, grossly incompatible with our colorblind Constitution, and how Justice Harlan's dissent demonstrated what he called the right thing to do. Thomas is right. Whenever the permanently true principles of the Declaration are rejected, there are consequences. Thus, said Thomas, we have to demonstrate courageous devotion to the enduring principles of the Declaration if the laws of nature and nature's God are to continue to guide us, and if we are to make it for yet another 250 years. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint.
Thank you, John. Weather where you live with meteorologist Kevin Williams next.
Here is your family life forecast for this afternoon. Variable cloudiness, sunny breaks, a shower or two here and there with high temperatures cool in the 50s to near 60. For tonight, partly cloudy, then becoming cloudy in Pennsylvania, and some rain and showers will arrive in Pennsylvania overnight, continue into tomorrow. Across New York State tomorrow, there'll be just a couple of scattered showers. Low temperatures tonight near 40, high temperatures tomorrow mainly 60s. For Sunday, clouds followed by some sunshine with high temperatures in the mid-50s to the middle 60s.
Thank you, Kevin. It's Friday, folks. Congratulations, you've made it. And this is the Noon Report on Family Life. This is Capital Connection. Fridays during the Noon Report, we give you direct connection to all that's happening in Albany and Harrisburg with the experts on the issues at the state capitals. They are, as always, Jason McGuire with New York Families and Michael Gear at the Pennsylvania Family Institute. Well, Jason, you told me a long time ago on this program that when it comes to the New York State budget, nothing happens until everything happens. And yesterday it seemed like a whole lot happened all at once. Governor Hochul goes out there, announces this deal on a $268 billion budget. And then within a matter of hours, the Assembly Speaker says, hold on a minute, there is no deal. So I'll ask you, is there a deal or isn't there on the budget in New York right now?
You know, this is becoming a bit of a pattern in New York where the governor comes out and by herself announces the deal has been cut with the legislature, only to have the legislative members, the leaders, come out and to say, no, there is no deal yet. I think this is becoming a tool for the governor to try to ratchet down conversation, and it may be an indication that we are now nearing the end of negotiations, but we're not quite there yet. So Speaker Hastie was a little hot under the collar, trying to push back and maintain that he has not yet signed off on the deal the governor is seeking. From my perspective, New York does not yet have a budget.
Yeah, and it should be worth mentioning, this now is the latest state budget in 16 years, and Governor Hochul never had an on-time budget in the 4 years that she's been governor. Moving on to Harrisburg, Michael, big news. Senate committee this week voting on a bill that would ban taxpayer dollars, Medicaid dollars, from funding sex reassignment operations on minors. We'll see where this goes in the full Senate and then the House, but got to ask you, how widespread of a practice is this in the Commonwealth?
Well, it's pretty widespread. You know, the bill you're talking about, Bob, is Senate Bill 1321, which is sponsored by Senator Chris Gebhardt of Lebanon County. It's critical for Pennsylvania families because according to our research at Pennsylvania Family Institute with Right to Know requests, our Commonwealth has spent over $31 million over the years in taxpayer dollars on these sex-rejecting drugs, hormones, and procedures for minors, with more than 6,200 minor Pennsylvania children put on this path. That's exploded from just about 100 back in 2015. Children's Hospital in Philadelphia is one of the worst offenders in the country for these kinds of so-called interventions. So we're encouraging people to support this bill to protect Pennsylvania children and to stop forcing taxpayers to fund these harmful experiments. Folks who are listening or on our email list can watch for an alert that we'll be sending out Monday so they can take action on this bill and contact their senators.
Gotcha. I know it probably stands a good chance in the Senate. We'll see in the House. Is the governor going to veto this if it were to ever reach his desk?
If I were to predict, he'd be under pressure from Democrats to do that. That's sort of been his MO on any of these bills that seek to protect children, sadly.
Well, redistricting's all the rage, Jason. We saw Joe Morelli in Rochester meet with the governor this week about redrawing New York's political lines. Democrats already have a 19-7 advantage when it comes to the congressional delegation in New York. So I got to ask you, what is the motivation here for doing this in New York York State?
Well, I think the motivation is simply raw power. Those in power want to keep it, and those who don't have it want to attain it in the government circles. And I think the Democrats see themselves as being pushed out and wanting to retain just that control over the executive office, the presidency, let alone Congress. So they're just trying to draw the maps to be able to make sure that they have that power once again in future elections. But we are a representative form of government, and I think both parties need to remember that we just simply let it play out in the normal census process. Let that redrawing of the lines occur after the census every 10 years, and then whoever wins those seats, let it play out and give the people a chance to vote for their representatives in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, it seems like we're going down a rabbit trail here with this mid-decade redistricting. Hopefully it'll stop. We'll do it the way it's intended to happen. Michael, primary day is a week from Tuesday. Hard to believe it's already here. There's about a dozen states, I believe, that have a closed primary, meaning unaffiliated voters cannot take part. Pennsylvania is one of those states. You support the closed primary system. Explain to our audience why it should stay the way it is.
I think primaries exist so that members of each political party can choose their own nominees. There's some ideological component of choosing which party you're going to be part of and hoping your parties will stand for the things that you stand for. And when you open it up and let unaffiliated voters who don't really necessarily have those kinds of commitments get involved in voting or switching sides or those sorts of things to pick candidates, you weaken the whole system and weaken the ability for the parties to actually choose people who stand for those values. I think Pennsylvania should keep its closed primary system. If you want to vote in the primary, register with the party whose nominee you want to help choose.
All right, moving on. The New York Cannabis Control Board, Jason, recently ruled that it will let marijuana growers sell pot at farmers markets and other state-approved pop-up locations. Marijuana use in New York has gone up by almost 20% since the drug became legal 5 years ago. How will this decision by the Cannabis Control Board exacerbate New York's growing addiction to marijuana?
Well, it's just increasing the access once again to pot across our state. This is becoming a growing problem, and now it is just normalizing and expanding it again. Remember that when pot is legalized by the state, it is not a neutral position. It is one that is an affirmation of it. It is a promotion of it. The state is vested in pot doing well in the state because it seeks the tax dollars that come along from that. And so when the state takes the position that it does, it's simply kicking open the doors, making it available to everyone at almost any time. That's problematic for the people of New York.
Yeah, I know you're fighting this battle every year, it seems, Michael, and the margins are getting closer every year. But marijuana has become a cash crop in the states now where it's legal for recreational purposes. How do you balance the economic gains versus the societal ills that are caused from the commercialization of this drug?
I think right off the bat, the economic gains are overstated by a large margin in terms of what states who have legalized marijuana have seen. And these so-called gains for a few struggling farmers are vastly outweighed by the societal damage that we're seeing across the country in the states that have legalized. We're not talking about the weak pot of the 1970s. Today's high-potency cannabis is fueling a surge in psychosis, schizophrenia, anxiety disorders, and addiction, especially among young people whose brains are still developing. More ER visits, impaired driving. The litany of the damages are certainly not outweighed by the so-called economic gains that the supporters project.
Well, there was a Siena poll out this week, Jason, that showed Governor Hochul with a 16-point lead over Bruce Blakeman in the run for governor, about 6 months to go. I know that Blakeman met in Washington at the White House with President Trump, and it got some folks asking the question, would it help or hurt him if Trump were to stump for Bruce Blakeman in New York? What say you, Jason?
Well, I think at this point, Mr. Blakeman's going to have to do something to raise his name ID. That's his biggest problem, and that is the one benefit that stumping with Trump could bring for him is to raise his ID across the state. No matter what he does, Governor Kathy Hochul and the Democratic Party is going to accuse him of being too close to Trump. And so while Trump tends to be very unpopular in the state, he would help to raise the name ID of Mr. Blakeman.
Yeah, there are polls as well, Michael. I thought it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on this. John Fetterman underwater in his own party by about 40 points. Some are wondering if he should switch parties and become a Republican. Fetterman said he'd be a terrible Republican and says he still votes the majority of the time with Democrats. But I got to ask you, would it be better off for John Fetterman if he were to switch parties and become a Republican when he's up for re-election?
Well, I get asked that question a lot because John Fetterman is kind of a unique unicorn out there in terms of Democrats because the party line is so disciplined in the Democratic Party. Everybody shouts and sings from the same song sheet. John Fetterman sort of votes his own conscience, especially on things like Israel, on the border, on even the war in Iran. But as he said, he would make a terrible Republican in terms of how he votes. I mean, he voted against protecting girls' sports. He's voted against any pro-life legislation and for any pro-abortion legislation that comes down the pike. And so when we look at the issues, at least that I, as a conservative and a Republican, are considering, as much as I'm appreciative of John Fetterman voting his conscience, especially on some of those issues, I don't think he'd succeed as a Republican.
I know the Republicans like to say they're a big tent party. That would be a really big tent. John Fetterman fits under that tent. A lot of places we went this week. If you have questions about any of the topics discussed, or you'd simply like to learn more about New York families doing a great work in Albany, Jason, where can they find you online?
NewYorkFamilies.org.
Stay informed on all the issues as well in Pennsylvania. If you want to learn more about the Pennsylvania Family Institute, keeping us in the know from Harrisburg. Michael, where can they find you?
PAFamily.org.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Capital Connection comes your way Fridays during the Noon Report or online anytime at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and FamilyLife.org. And finally, at noon for Friday, Pennsylvania police are looking for the owner of a bird that's causing a disturbance in one neighborhood. More from Family Life's Brian Query.
Police in Lititz, Pennsylvania say a bird was taken into custody after being found near Warwick and Klein Streets. The bird's unusual calls were ruffling some feathers in the neighborhood. It was initially believed to be a rooster, but police later posted an update saying it may be a hen. The bird is facing charges that include disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, possession of suspicious pecking devices, and loitering. The department posted photos of the bird in a holding cell and exploring the facilities. Police say if you are the bird's owner, you should call the Lititz Police Department before he flies the coop. Brian Query, Family Life News.
All right, thank you, Brian. And that's our world, the world we live in. Friday, the 8th day of May. Have a wonderful weekend and happy Mother's Day. I'm Bob Price, Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.